Hello, everyone. Welcome to Creativity-Hive's weekly show. I am Miriam Haugen. I'm part of the Creativity-Hive team, and we help budding videographers achieve massive post-production skills through one-on-one teaching and live group coaching. And our weekly show focuses on people working in various aspects of the industry. And one of the things I love about this is I get to meet so many interesting people. And today we have Neal. I'm going to slaughter your last name. I
Give
just
it a go.
realized. Romanek or Romanek?
Oh, Romanek. Very good.
Romanek.
Second,
Okay.
second try.
I just was going,
Excellent.
I
Excellent work.
don't know where the emphasis goes. So Neal is a screenwriter, a writer, and editor of FEED magazine. So tell us a little bit about how your career developed. How do you become a writer?
How did I get here? Well, it's interesting. Being a writer is like I hate being alone, and I have no self-discipline, and
That sounds really bad
and
for a writer.
and yeah, and yeah, being in my head is a bad place. And so I'm a writer. Again, I have no skills whatsoever to be a writer, and still I seem to be doing it somehow or other. And
Okay.
so so yeah, I started in I'm editor of FEED magazine now, and FEED is has been around for about 4 years, and it's a quarterly magazine that covers innovations in broadcast and kind of new media. Pretty much anybody with a video camera and a dream, would be interested in the magazine. Um, but in the bigger picture, yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in kind of creating worlds or creating experiences, and I went to film school at USC, in LA, and would always had this idea of wanting to be somehow involved in the movies and involved in creating stories and creating visual stories, and went to USC film school, left film school, was a screenwriter in LA for a while, and had some really early success there. This was in the 1990s, which is when people were buying spec scripts left and right for ridiculous sums of money, and I was able to sort of catch that wave,
Awesome.
um, and for about 6 months, I was the sci-fi screenwriter in town, and yeah, I worked at the Motion Picture Academy for a while, and then eventually I came to the UK, where I live now. I live in London, and kind of continued that, but also started getting involved in technology writing and writing about film and TV technology, and that's my day job now, is working on FEED magazine and kind of having put together this magazine, which is kind of something new, I think, in terms of those business to business kind of trade magazines. I guess we try to do something that's kind of very glossy and slightly glamorous, and something that people would want to have on their desks.
It really is beautiful, and
Oh, thanks.
I'll be putting the link up here because you can subscribe to the online version, right?
That's right. Yeah. And the online version much lighter than the print version. There were these big,
Okay.
thick quarterlies, that sort of drop like a phone book, which is very unusual, I think, in the industry. So yes, I've been doing that. In the meantime, I'm still working on some film and TV stuff. I've got a novel that's been out for a while. And the thing about writing, I just complain about writing all day long. I hate it. It's horrible. I hate this. The worst
You
thing that
hate
could ever
writing, but
happen
you
to
are.
someone. And yeah, and I just still kind of keep doing it. And it seems to be working out pretty well.
Right. I'm gonna put up the um there we go. There
Oh
we
yeah,
go.
that is
That's
great.
the link.
Yeah,
And so that is interesting. So you went to film school. So
Mhm.
was writing, what was in your mind when you when you studied that? I mean, were you thinking more that you would be running a camera or being a director, or what were you thinking?
Well, I went in. I went to film school. Like, I mean, I was very lucky to have grown up in the 1980s. And I saw there was a thing on Twitter, actually. Somebody had we're talking about, I guess there's a film series out, maybe in LA or maybe the Egyptian, I'm not sure, but about all these movies that came out in like 1982, and it's like, it's The Wrath of Khan, it's Blade Runner, it's, Poltergeist, it's just this whole long set of kind of amazing, sort of visionary, thrilling, beautifully designed movies. And I remember going to those as a kid, and it was just like every single movie was just blew your mind. And we're just spoiled for this thing of like, this is what movies are like. Movies are like this all the time. This is the way it's supposed to be all the time. And kind of coming out of that, being so just kind of excited about the possibility of what movies could do. And then also, I grew up with movies. My mom and dad were like huge movie fans. And so I grew up with conversations about movies kind of going on all the time. And I'm told, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a great story, so I'm going to stick with it, that the first movie I was ever taken to was 2001, when I was like a newborn practically, in 1969, and my parents would always take me to movies, like inappropriate movies. Like I saw The Omen when it came out, when I was as old as the kid in the movie.
Oh my gosh. So did you have any nightmares?
I had nightmares, and I loved it, and I love that too. I love being frightened, I was a very kind of nervous, anxious kid, but I still love just being frightened. And so kind of taking that and then growing up as well in that same period, I found, Dungeons and Dragons. And there was this thing about kind of creating worlds and building worlds and being able to create characters in those worlds and ideas in those worlds and moments and feelings and moods, that I was just really into that whole idea. And so I wanted to be a director. So went out to USC. It was either USC or it was going to be a tiny liberal arts college in Ohio, where I grew up. Went to USC, luckily, and didn't get into the film school right away. And I went there, and I was surrounded by all these brilliantly smart people. There's like everybody seemed brilliant, and I'm like, I am an idiot surrounded by all these smart people. And there's no way I'm going to pull this off. But I kept applied a couple of times, and eventually I got into the film school there.
So it's very competitive, huh?
Yeah. It was quite competitive, and people had kind of breezed in there. Yeah, I just got in as a freshman, and I was like, oh god, all these smart people, and so I felt like I'd kind of like sort of sneaked in. But it was great. It was a great time there at film school, and I had these amazing teachers and an amazing group of friends and compadres there, and there was like kind of Bryan Singer was there, and Matthew Weiner, who did Mad Men, and I knew Matt quite well, and John Singleton. And it was just this right time there where there was kind of this group of really great, interesting people, and we had great teachers. So there was a guy there who some of your viewers may have heard of, Frank Danielle. Frank Danielle was the dean of the film school at that time, and he had come over from Czechoslovakia, where he was like friends with Milos Forman and Milan Kundera and all those fancy people. And he'd come over, and he'd moved to NYU and then moved to Sundance and helped Robert Redford a bit down there. And he was this amazing teacher of story. And so he would have these amazing classes where he would just kind of run down these films and just break these films down into tiny little pieces, and you see this sort of sequence in every moment in this film and everything. And those really sort of stuck with me. And I think that was the thing that sort of made me think, well, writing is a way to do this. And I always was writing with the idea of, if I become a good writer and a successful writer, I can be a director. And so most of that stuff that I did was about writing, was writing about creating these worlds and kind of trying to create a vision or create an experience or create an entire world. So most of the stuff that I've done has been about that. It's, it's science fiction, it's fantasy, it's historical stuff, quite a lot of historical stuff, some comedy, but again, that idea of creating a whole world where a character can live in, or an audience can kind of live in.
Awesome.
So that's the kind of what I followed kind of through my whole career, is basically that, that striving for that idea of trying to create this immersive world.
So are there any like projects that you've worked on that you our audience might have heard of?
No, nothing. I've never had anything produced. So I had for a while this kind of career cooking along in Hollywood. But like many, you can work for ages in the industry and never have anything produced. So I had, as a matter of fact, kind of back there on the wall is some pre-production art for I think I'm pointing it to, for a science fiction script that I had written, which was a thing that kind of had been optioned that kind of launched my career. That was a kind of dystopian thriller, kind of along the lines of some of those 1970s thrillers like Soylent Green or Rollerball or those kinds of things, which kind of sat around for a while and it was never actually made. I wrote an adaptation of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for Dino De Laurentiis, kind of before he passed away, and wrote a horror movie, a couple horrors, and a few other things. But that nothing ever quite got greenlit.
Someday when you're dead and gone, the great real Neal Romanek will be discovered, and oh my God, look at this story. We have to make this story.
Maybe, but we'll. Yeah, and I'm working on some stuff now. I'm working with a production company. We have a series that we're taking around, and so that's another thing. But in the meantime, I've written a novel with the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate. So Edgar Rice Burroughs, who created Tarzan, and John Carter of Mars. We have the Disney John Carter movie. This sort of great kind of essential pulp novelist of about 100 years ago, and he kind of created modern science fiction. You don't have Star Wars without those Edgar Rice Burroughs books. And so I had gotten hooked up with the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate, and I talked to my agent, and I was like, those books are pretty old. I wonder if they're public domain. Could you maybe write a sequel to one of those books, maybe one of the Mars books, or and my agent said, well, it's funny, I'm actually representing the Burroughs estate. You should talk to them. There was this interesting coincidence. So yeah, I talked to them, and they said, well, we have, there's all these different worlds that, Edgar Rice Burroughs created, Tarzan and Mars and Venus and all these other kind of worlds. And again, that reading those books as a kid, I was very much excited by that world building. And they said, we this Venus series, kind of Adventures on Venus. Carson Napier is the hero. It's Adventures on Venus, written about 1920s, 30s, 40s, and they kind of have a slight political edge to them as well. They said, wait, why don't you write a new book for us on those? So I did that, and that's just come out. It came out actually earlier this year. It's called Skies of Venus, and that is very much in that tradition of that kind of Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, and those early Edgar Rice Burroughs kind of adventure novels. And I think people seem to like it. It's very faithful to the original Edgar Rice Burroughs kind of tone, and that kind of has fidelity to the story world that he created. And again, it's great. It's that, I seem to keep coming back to that thing of being able to, how do you build a world? How do you create a universe that somebody else can live in?
Right. That is exciting. Well, I'm going to bring Neal. He's probably has tons of questions he's come up with.
Well, nice to meet you. And I'm one of those not unusual things. I was an English lit major in college, and and I have some friends that have been doing writing and whatnot. So it's always. But one of the things I want to kick in with here first is one of my, I don't know, it was the first NAB I went to or the second NAB I went to. They were having, these panel discussions you'll see in these various booths out across the floor and everything. And I stopped by one that was going on that was a bunch of screenwriters. And so they had like 4 or 5 of them on this stage in this big square booth and talking about what it was like and, how they got published and all this kind of stuff. And at one point, one of the people mentioned that he says, by the way, if you notice, we're all listed by the how many scripts we've sold and whatnot here. He says, I have to point out that Joe over there, he's made probably 3 times the money I have made in script writing in Hollywood, and he still hasn't had a single thing produced yet. But he's making good money at it. So the goal in screenwriting is just to sell a script. It's you hope somebody makes it, but the main goal is to sell a script, and that is something that not very many people seem aware of at all. And it's very common for screenwriters to go a long time very successful at selling scripts that are sold well. They're shopped around to 3 or 4 companies. Somebody buys the rights for them, then they pass them on to somebody else who pays the rights for them, and nobody ever actually makes it into something.
Yeah, I would. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So they were saying that there's like probably 5 to 6 times as many scripts written as any even pilot or test shooting has ever done with. So script writing is a fascinating part of the industry. So I'm thrilled to have you on.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's a yeah, you're producing something. I always think of it like you're producing a blueprint for a building that may or may not get made. Which is why it can be so heartbreaking. For you're working away and slaving away over this building. You're building this perfect blueprint for a building that's going to get made. This big skyscraper, and you put all your work in, and you kind of present it. Here's my idea for the skyscraper, and people are like, well, could it be 20 stories instead of 50? Or does it? I don't know. Could it be wider instead of taller? And like, we don't like that. What other skyscrapers have you designed? Do you have anything else we could see? So it is like you're creating a plan, you're creating a blueprint for something that may never happen, and probably like I don't know how the architecture business works, but I'm sure there's a lot of that thing of like, okay, we're going to create this design, it's going to be this new shopping mall, and this is exactly the way it's going to look, and then it never actually gets built. And I think that's very similar to the screenwriting, and you're kind of pitching these ideas about something that is going to eventually employ lots of people. But you're really ultimately just sketching out the blueprint. But it has to be a blueprint that's exciting, that means something, that is castable, that's marketable. There are all these different angles to it that you have to, that have to be there before it actually goes on to the next stage of actually being made, or before somebody's willing to risk some money on it.
So did you have to actually go before producers and pitch your story ideas?
Yeah, I've had a lot of it. That's what often happens is you'll have a script, maybe a script that's a good calling card script, and it goes out to somebody and they're like, oh, this is great. This is similar to something we already want to do. So you go in maybe they don't want to do that script that you've written, but they're like, well, that's interesting. What else do you have? Can you pitch us some other things? And it's good
to have to be prepared.
Yeah, and to say, well, yeah. I've got this, and a company may say, well, we have this, we have a kind of a horror thing we're kicking around, or we've got, there's a, we want to do a buddy kind of cop thing, but we need a twist on it. And so they'll be willing to hear these pitches about, how would you take on that idea, or what kind of ideas do you have? And it very much can depend on what the mood is of the person on the day, or catching the right person at the right time. Because I've been in meetings where it's, you really just worked on this pitch for ages, and you really kind of got it done. You give them the whole pitch and everything, and they're like, and they're just not interested. You can tell from the get-go, they're just not interested. They want to get to lunch. They want to get this meeting over with. And then other times where it's just almost accidental, like you sort of say something and you realize, oh wait, I think I've already gotten this job. Did I just get this job? It's happened so fast, you're not even sure it's actually happened. So I think like anything like that, you do the preparation, and then what the results are can be very unpredictable.
That program I saw, one of the people said that his first actual produced show, he says the way I got this is just one of those things. It's just so freaking bizarre. He had pitched, I don't even remember what it was, to a producer and his cohorts, and they'd called him in for a talk and said, well, we're not really interested in that, but we've got this kind of Starsky and Hutch remake buddy cop movie that we've got a script for, and we're not really that pleased with the script. So we'd like to see you rework that script. And so he's going, okay. So he reworked that script. Did that script ever go anywhere? No. They liked what he did with it, so they told him, now we need to actually get a script for a rom-com. Can you create us a rom-com? And so you just, I'm sure I can, And you always say yes, right?
Yeah.
And so he went home and came up with a draft idea for a rom-com, and I can't remember which one it turned into, but it was a moderately successful movie. And he says, even then I didn't write that much of the script for it, because I came up with basically the idea for it, and I started fleshing out the script, and then all of a sudden I realized, no, they'd given it to somebody else to do the final thing, and he had the credits on the movie, but he didn't actually do much of the writing on the script itself. And he goes, "That's Hollywood." It just
It is that, and I think it's very much. It also is very much a Hollywood phenomenon too. That I live in the UK now, but that idea of you come in and you work for hire and you give your best work. You do your best, but you also have to be willing to have somebody say, "No, this is crap. We're not going to use this," or "You're fired," or "Wonderful, we love it. Stick around here and we'll give you more work," or that it can be very unpredictable. Whereas I get the impression over here in the UK, and I've been kind of meeting with producers and things here, that there's, I wouldn't call it respect necessarily, but there's more sense of being careful around a writer. You don't think you would have that same same ruthlessness or that same straightforwardness that a Hollywood writer has, or has to deal with here in the UK. I have the impression that it would be like, oh, who's going to give him notes? You give him. I'm not going to. You give him the notes. Whereas in Hollywood, it's like you get the notes and you expect to get the notes, and you're prepared to receive those notes at any time. So,
and I get the idea frequently anytime I hear screenwriters talk, that they don't think in Hollywood that they're taken any more seriously than the guy that's the assistant grip that's hanging lights on a scaffold out there. Swap him out, who cares? Swap out the screenwriter, who cares? So they go, yeah, you exist. You're a necessary part of the process. And what was your name again?
Yeah, I think there's that thing with writing, because everybody can write. I can write. I can put words down. How hard can it be? Yeah, it's I think it's a cliche, but I think it's always been the case that, and it's the case in journalism as well. I've noticed it's that idea of being able to write or put out stories. It's like just as if you're it just happens automatically without a lot of work in there.
Well, our daughter, when she was still in high school and getting ready to go off to college, wanted to be an author, and she of course loves science fiction. We're big science fiction fans. So by the way, your section on science fiction, I was just listening to.
Oh.
But she wrote a piece and then she sent it off to Bain Publishing, which did a lot of sci-fi publishing, or still does, and it got fairly quickly up to Jim Bain, the owner and main publisher there, and he thought enough of it that he wrote back and said, "This isn't, of course, ready to go as is, but it's an interesting idea. I'm going to assign you to one of my writers." And I don't remember which one it was, but it was one of his main writers, sends an email to Anna saying, "I'd like to talk about this." And so she went through a little bit of a process on it, and over the next 3 or 4 months decided that, there's just too damn much work and pressure in writing. And she loves to write, but she doesn't want to do that. She found out, there's this whole thing of fanfic, where where there are sites out there where you write and other people read and comment on it and everything. But of course, you write as much as you want about what you want, and there's no pressure to it. And writing is something she needs to do. She really needs to write, but she just doesn't want to do the pressure. For you to work with the screenwriters, people and all of the things and the producers and everything like that, there's pressure. You've got deadlines to meet. You've got opinions to, where you think the guy's nuts, but his boss is going to be the one writing the check. So even if you think he's nuts.
Yeah. Okay. I want to hear about how FEED magazine came to be.
So FEED is, hey, I've got a visual aid here.
Oh, hey.
FEED magazine right there.
Yeah.
I'll do it like a spokesmodel here.
Show me how thick it is.
Nice.
It's pretty thick. That's a pretty thick magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Feed, beautifully designed by Manwei Wang, our brilliant designer. And people always say, oh, it's just the design is gorgeous. I can't believe how great this is. They don't always say, I read the article and it's really good, but they do say that the design is amazing. So, but yeah, I'd been working since I came here to the UK in, as I said before, doing film and TV journalism, writing mostly about production and kind of creative side, and had been editor on a few different magazines, mostly about the broadcast industry, and done a lot of trade shows at IBC and NAB and all the usual trade shows and all those panels and stuff that you said you saw at NAB. Was a moderator and producer of a lot of those. And I had been editing a magazine called TV Tech Global, which is now I think just been compressed entirely into TV Tech, future publishing publication. And they'd kind of gotten rid of the brand that I was working on, and I was kind of floating free for a while. This was about 4 years ago. And Bright Publishing got a hold of me. Bright Publishing does Definition Magazine, which is a cinematography magazine, and Pro Movie Maker, which is kind of prosumer filmmaking magazine, as well as a few other kinds of things. Still photography magazines is kind of where they started. But they came to me and they said that we want to do like a broadcast magazine. We're not quite sure what that's going to look like. We want something kind of new, but what's that? The industry is changing. What should we do? And it sort of kicked around a few ideas, and we came up with this idea of Feed magazine. And Feed has been called by a few people, and I'm very flattered by it, the Wired for the broadcast industry. And I think that's kind of a good way to sum it up. It's basically looking at the broadcast industry and broadcast tech and what it takes to create television, whatever television is now, which is, it could be streaming, right. It could be live streaming. It's what we're doing now. This is television. This is broadcasting right now. So, it's trying to take broadcasting out of the 20th century and put it into a sort of modern kind of web-centric context, where we talk about streaming instead of broadcasting. We were a monthly magazine for a while, covering OTT, live streaming, esports, 5G, kind of new technologies, sometimes bleeding edge technologies. There's usually a really interesting interview in there with somebody who's much smarter than I am, and it really took off really quickly. We launched it at NAB exactly 4 years ago. And when the pandemic hit, we kind of reassessed and thought, well, we're doing these monthly magazines. Maybe we'd do better to go quarterly. So we have these nice, big, chunky quarterly magazines now. And we've tried to kind of create this great print experience, which our strategy is that a high quality print experience will be attractive. People will spend more time in it. It gives people time to think. Everything is digital now. Digital magazines are available online. Our magazine is available digitally online. But if anything's online, you're competing with somebody's Facebook feed, or you're competing with YouTube, or you're competing with Netflix. Once you're on that screen, you're on somebody's screen, you're also competing with all their other screen priorities. So we thought, if you could design this crazy new technology, if this didn't exist before, we thought, wow, what a great technology. It's actually physical. It goes into somebody's house and it sits there. It's like physically there. It doesn't, when they turn off their computer, it doesn't go away. It just stays there. They can actually look at it, and there's no electricity burning with this thing. I think people have appreciated that, and people have responded to it. And we launched a new brand at this past NAB. There's a section in Feed magazine called Extreme, which is about sports and action content, esports. And that we kind of have split out to its own separate magazine now, Extreme. And so we launched Extreme as its own magazine at this past NAB. So if you were out there in the West Hall, you saw there was kind of a big stand, and it had the new Extreme magazines up there. So that's a new thing we're launching. So it'll be sports, action content, building sports brands. If you're like a league or a team, or even like a niche sport, like you run a cornhole league in your local town or whatever, college sports, high school sports. Again, because these digital tools, they kind of scale. So the tools that you're using for a big global sports event are kind of the principles behind them are not too different from what you might use for just a local high school event. It's something that you want to stream locally. And in some cases, it's a bit of an oversimplification, but in some cases, it's only a matter of scale. So we had good response, and we're kind of looking forward to seeing how that goes over the next couple months, and we'll kind of reassess when we go to the IBC show in Amsterdam in September. But it's looking pretty promising.
That's my goal. I've been telling Neal that I want to go to IBC.
Have you not been to IBC in a while?
No.
Oh.
This was my first NAB this year.
Oh, wow.
So, but Amsterdam sounds a little bit more interesting to me than Las Vegas. So
Las Vegas is interesting.
It's interesting.
I've been there a few times, but it's like kind of I feel like my tolerance goes down every time I'm there, a little bit less each time.
We have good friends in Las Vegas that we occasionally go outside of NAB to visit with, and basically, I really dislike Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm. What do you dislike most about it?
It's just
you can't choose one thing.
Dry, hot, ugly brown, except for the areas like along the strip. The strip, especially at twilight, when you got a little bit of light going and you've got all the light from everything. The strip can be beautiful to look at, but the temperatures can be uncomfortable, and I don't like heat. And it's just dry, brown, kind of ugly, and so it's shall we say very low on my list of favorite places. Except that, of course, I've been going there since 2014 for NAB, and you can meet some marvelous people at that presentation. But Miriam heard some of my colorist friends and everything who are UK based, and some of the others talking about IBC, and that it was, of course, in Amsterdam along the canal in September with beautiful, beautiful early fall weather, and she was going,
I want to go to Amsterdam.
Sometimes sometimes it's rainy and stuff, but occasionally I've been to a few of those IBCs in September in Amsterdam, and it's just warm, and people are riding around on their bikes, and it's just perfect. You get just that little snapshot moment of, and then you're frantically running around again.
Well, this is turning into a travelogue, and that's not our goal. but anyway, I really appreciate you coming on. I think very interesting, different perspective on the whole industry, and everybody should check out FEED magazine.
Yes, absolutely.
I love the idea of having something tactile, something that you can actually hold in your hand.
Take on an airplane.
Yeah, well, exactly. And yeah, I mean, if there are, if people want to get a hold of me, they can get a hold of me at the website. Go to, as you put on there, feedmagazine.tv, and under contacts, my email address is there. And yeah, get a hold of me, and I'm sure we can cut you a deal and getting you a print magazine. But you can also always see the digital magazine online at the website. And there's interactive stuff there now. There's links. There's embedded video in those, and yeah, hopefully we're just going to do more and more. So
yeah, that is awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to sign off now. Goodbye, everybody.
Sayonara.
Bye, guys. Thanks.